Jeff actually did really great at it. And what I want to add, and from my perspective, I want to add, because this is a struggle that we're having with our young sons. And we do say our young sons, our young men, our brothers, and we can't allow our daughters to be excluded, because our daughters are also banging, our daughters are out here, dying just as well as our sons. And our daughters we have lost just as well as our son. To come on what Corvell spoke of, when we speak of the sad thing of the drug sale, is that also a lot of the drugs our children are selling, they're using. And our sons, speaking with these young men, what they're doing, they realize, you're 20 years old and you wake up one morning in the county with a murder charge that you don't even know you committed because you popped a Molly, sipped some syrup, and smoked some loud the night before, so the influence was so heavy when he did the crime, he didn't even know he did it. So they're waking up in jail cells, facing charges on things they didn't know, but this is what has been put before them. And as Jeff said, this is what has been created for our son. And another point I will emphasize on that we criminalize our children. We criminalize our sons, we criminalize them, and we're the first ones to jump up and say in the lot B examples at work. And everybody's talking about all the crime in Chicago, and the coworker, so to be the good nigga or somebody, our people are the first to jump up to exclude themselves from them niggas because they want to be the good niggas, so we gonna talk about them niggas, because don't you call me one of them niggas, because I'm not one of them niggas. I want you to know I'm a good one. Yes, sir. So I don't come from them. And yeah, they should be ashamed of themselves, and we gonna call the police and we gonna get them up off of here. We gonna get them away. And they be talking about their sons, their nephews, their own. But go home and your son is sitting there loading a gun. You know what I'm saying? But we're not understanding, we're so quick to blame. And a lot of us who came up here in Chicago know you're at an age now where now the law ain't running up on you, but they used to run up on you. And so it's nothing new, and it's been happening. And what we have to do is to get our people to understand that there is a connection with the horizontal violence and the violence that's being placed upon our people, the occupational violence, colonial violence. And we have to get an understanding of colonial violence, because without the oppression and colonization, we would not have horizontal violence. We would not have our young men out here shooting and banging, because they would be somewhere being productive for their community, because they can wake up every morning and go to jobs and things that are to sustain their families, to sustain their communities. Our daughters, our women can wake up in the morning and do things to sustain their families, sustain their community. But we have to understand and stop biting our lip, because either you're down with it or you're not down with it. That's just sitting, that's all. And that's like a charge to many of you who are out here, and that I know we have to make a decision. Well, I've made my decision. So many have to make their decision that, really, when you say you down, you're down. So you can't get halfway, and that's the problem why we're not getting to it, because we get amongst each other like this and talk all types of shit. Then we get out in the street and here come the police and everybody, well, I gotta go. You know what I'm saying, everybody? You ain't say to them what you say to me. The things we say here, we have to walk, because as you see, we can't get them in here. We can't get them in here. But me and my comrades, we get on that corner with this mic and we go to them. And I ask these young men, why are you out here? What's this? If this was this way, why do you do this? What else am I gonna do? And we have to have a passion. It has to be your heart. It's not a hobby. This is our lives. And what we're working for, this is our future. And you sit now, you may be childless, but this is your life now, and not be selfish, but not in the way you say be selfish. But we can't be selfish. We have to understand, because myself, I don't have them now, but I'll have grandchildren. I'll have great-grandchildren. I may be long gone, but I'll be damned if I'm gonna just sit back and allow them to come into this shit. You know what I'm saying? You have an obligation. So it's not beseeching or asking or begging. It's our duty. It's our duty. This is nothing that we're supposed to be fighting for our people. We're supposed to be. We can't feel that, okay, well, I got a place to stay and I make a couple of dollars and, so I'm cool. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because for them couple of dollars and for that place, you can't, I forgot the word, kick it with your neighbors. You can't get to know your neighbors. You can't fraternize with your people. You can't fraternize with them at work. They see too many black folks talking together, that's your ass. You can't, you know what I'm saying? You can't just be you. You can't even, people can't even breathe right. And you shouldn't be burdened when you come home from work. You shouldn't be burdened from labor. Number one, you know what I'm saying? And it shouldn't be that way, but people are. And if you have a man who's, he listening to the baby crying, his wife in his ear just yak, and we're talking about a young man that's there and the landlord done put the note on the door, you know what I'm saying, the candle burnt out because the light's off. You know what I'm saying? He can't really wash too well because the water's cold because ain't no heat, so ain't nothing heating that up if the water's on. Then he gonna step onto the street and you think he's gonna be in good confrontation with the people he come in contact with because the frustration is gonna cause it. So, but we have to be the ones. And even those of us who come to say we want to take care of that, want things done, how do we do it? Instead of coming in the aspect, yeah, we do it, we come telling them what they need to stop doing. But what we need to do is tell them what they have to start doing. And that's the thing. And that's why we're here. And those are the things that we are developing, and the things that we've been hearing are things that we have to start bringing to our people to start doing and stop doing. We've taken on other ways to say, yeah, you're doing this, and you shouldn't be serving, and you shouldn't be hustling, and you shouldn't be banging. We need to tell them what they can be doing because we all suffer from it. We're all affected by it. This time last year, I had 2 sons in prison, and I still have one there. I might be a revolutionary, but I'm still a mother. I have a son who's supposed to be here today. But my son didn't come because it went down last night, so he got to stay on the block with his guys because it's going down. I'm a revolutionary, but I'm still a mother. I had a young man who's supposed to panel today. He couldn't panel because a young man in his organization gunned down at the beginning of this week. He couldn't panel. This is what's happening, and this is what we're seeing. So it's not just something we're coming from just to be or say what we're reading. We live these lives. We are all embedded inside of this. I'm embedded in it, and you're embedded in it. And we got to stop, even though we think we're sitting inside and we're not inside of it, because you're not inside of it until you're rubbing elbows and touching it. That's what we need to do. If we're going to be about it, be about it. And stop talking about it. And be about it. Stop being afraid of our own children. Stop being afraid of our people. Don't be afraid of them. That's why they're afraid of you. Because you judge them, we judge them. Stop being afraid. Move to them. This is how we have to do. We have to let these young brothers know they are our first line of defense. They are our soldiers, and we have to organize them in order to reestablish our communities and get them out of these lives. They don't want to die. They can act tough all they want to, y'all, and put on that front, but we all know they don't want to die. Come on. They want to live. So we have to give them something to live for. Because right now they don't think they have anything. So we have to give it to them. And that's why we are here. And I'm going to end on this note because I'm ready to get into how we need to go and how we as an organized people can establish ways and means to restore and revitalize our African communities. And with that being said, and for those of you who didn't know, and an honor for all of us, I'm going to introduce to you, as part of the Communities Under Siege. Our chairman, I am, like I said, we are MPDOM, and we are many of organizations that were founded by the African People's Socialist Party. The party was founded by our chairman, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. For almost 50 years, Chairman has been that one who has said, this is how it is, and I'm gonna tell it like it is, and they ain't trying to please nobody, ain't trying to say the right words to keep nobody like it. You like it, you like it, you don't, but it's about the struggle for my people, so I'm not compromising it. And he has done this, and he's doing this with organizations on 3 continents in this world, various countries in this world, leading, struggling for African liberation and self-determination for our people. And the work that has been done has been wonderful, tremendous, and we need to take that work that's flourishing and bring it to Chicago and bring it here and allow our communities to flourish. But I can't tell the whole story. So without further ado, brothers and sisters, I'd like to bring to you the chairman and founder of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru. I'd like to express my profound appreciation to NPDOM and Cobra for playing the role that you played in making this extraordinarily important conference happen. To everybody who's participated up to now, I continue to learn every time we have this kind of process at work, and I'm extraordinarily impressed by what happens in Chicago. And by that, what I mean is that Chicago has an incredible history, and it is our community in Chicago has an incredible history of struggle, resistance that has set standards for African people in various places around the world. And then just listening to what everybody has had to say up to now, and what you continue to hear through this process are symptoms of a huge problem. Every one of them alone sounds like a profound kind of contradiction. Everything that we've talked about, to the violence in this community, I really want to express appreciation to Brother Baker for helping us to deal with the narrative that's existing out here now about how all of our young people are terrorists and criminals and mad, etc. And none of them who have in this discussion has mentioned the name of John Burgess. None of them, you know who Burgess was, don't you, right? He's down in Tampa, Florida right now. And living on his pension. And this is a person who's responsible for more than 200 African people being falsely arrested, and there are more than that. These are just the people who've come forward to talk about what he's done. They don't talk about how he handcuffed in the back of these paddy wagons, these young Africans, where they had this sheet metal on the walls of the paddy wagons, and they would intentionally drive in such a fashion that the Africans who were in the thing would be thrown against the walls, and sometimes they've actually had their noses cut off on the metal that's in the wagon and that kind of thing. These filthy beasts would define our young people as the criminals and killers and things like that, and these are the murderers. And they don't mention Barack Hussein Obama, who's the drone meister, who's responsible for assassinating people all around the world right now as we have this discussion. So I'm not interested in this discussion that wants to criminalize our young people or African people in general. I think that I really want to appreciate you struggling for us to look at and change this entire narrative. We are not the problem, and we should not accept that reality. The other thing is that I think it's really important to understand that we've been hearing symptoms of a contradiction with all the discussions that we've been having now. And all of them are deep and profound. Economic issues, educational questions, police violence questions. These are symptoms of a profound contradiction. And that the reality is that you got the same problems in Chicago that African people got in Tampa, Florida, and Houston. Dallas, Texas, a white man just walked out of, just in the African community, just shot an 8-year-old child in the face and shot his mouth off an 8-year-old baby who was just out in his yard and shot it, and the child goes running into the house, his mouth is shot off, and white man just say, yeah, I shot the kid. You know? Or what about in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where a 107-year-old man who they were trying to move, wanted him to move from his room to go someplace else, and he didn't want to move, and so he barricaded his house, and the police come there in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. That's right. They used tear gas against the old man, and then they killed him. They're talking about they engaged in a shootout with a 107-year-old African man. Or what about the brother in North Carolina who had a car accident, wrecked his car, the car wrecked so badly that he had to kick out the rear window to get out of the car. And then he goes up to this white woman's house, knocks on the house at 2-something. He's wounded, hurt, trying to get help. And then she slams the door in his face and calls the police. He sees the police coming. He runs to the police asking for help. And then they shoot at him 12 times, hitting him 10 times and kills him dead. So we're not just talking about some extraordinary thing happening here. in Chicago. We got a problem throughout the world. And I think that's something that we should really look at and say that the Chicago problem is a problem that African people got in general. We got this problem in general. It is not a problem here. And if we don't understand it that way, we will never solve the problem, because we just keep looking at symptoms and trying to deal with symptoms instead of a profound contradiction we've got. I have to be quick because we don't have much time. I don't have much time here. But I want to just say, let's look at how we got in this mess, and perhaps it'll help us to understand how we can get out of this mess. Because that's a crucial question that we're confronted with. First of all, we got to throw out the window this whole notion about being Americans. Americans don't catch the hell that we catch. Americans do not catch the hell that we catch. So ain't no such thing as us being some kind of, we're not African Americans, Negro Americans, Americans tomorrow, Americans gonna be one day, second-class citizens. We are no such thing as that. That's a fallacy that we're hanging on to. And to the extent that we continue to hold on to this notion, we will never solve a problem. That's like somebody kidnapping you and then saying that you're a part of the family, right? Because they like to talk about America being this nation, they say it, of immigrants. Well, first of all, America is not a nation. It is a prison of nations. And not just us. I mean, they stole half of Mexico. Anybody remember that? They stole California, Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah. All of that used to be Mexico. They stole all of that. And then the people and then drew an artificial line to separate the people from whom they stole the land from the land itself. And everybody comes across the land, now they're illegal aliens. And they are the ones who, with us, are stuffed in these prisons all around the country. Is there some coincidence that America has the largest prison system on the planet Earth? More people in this prison in this country than any place on Earth. In fact, the second largest prison in the population in the world is in California. No, I'm sorry, it's Texas. Well, I'm sorry, it might be California. In fact, they tied with each other from time to time, California and Texas. They got more people in prison in California than they have people in prison in China with 1 billion people. Guess who's in prison in California and Texas? Africans and Mexicans. We got a situation where in this country, there are 2.5 people, something like 2.3 or so million people who are locked up in prison. At least half of them are African people. If they're free, if Africans and Mexicans, or so-called Latinos, went to prison at the same rate that white people go to prison in this country, the prison population would be reduced by half. It's been said, 1 out of every human being on earth who's in prison is an African in this country. That's no American. You're no American. The fact is that African people, white people have a wealth that's 22 times greater. The white family has wealth 22 times greater than African people. And they telling you that the reason that we don't have anything because we won't work hard. If working hard had anything to do with wealth, black people would be the richest people in this damn country. So it ain't got nothing to do with that. Ain't got nothing to do with that. It's the social system itself. And then not only is it a social system, but we've been tricked, as Malcolm X said, we've been bamboozled. Because they convinced us that here, white people, the difference in the conditions of existing white people and black people is white people are just more civilized, they got more Christianity, they save their money as opposed to us. Nonsense like this. And when the reality is that white people are just recent to human civilization itself. I'm not saying this to slander anybody, I just don't like people messing with us and then handing us nonsense that we take as some kind of education. It's not education. It's a form of indoctrination to have us to accept the place that we've been locked into by a social system based on theft and genocide. Okay? So, if you take just a period, 4 years, 1347, 1351, half the white people on earth died from plague. At least half the white people died. And then for the next 100 years or more, people continue to die from that plague and others that followed in its wake. It was a serious situation. But how then? And you cannot have economic development, you can't have a viable economy any place on earth. If half the population dies in 4 years, you do not have a viable economy. I don't give a damn what anybody says. You can't, that's made up stuff there. That's fantasy that they've been feeding us all along. that somehow once we catch up with the white people, we'll be all right. You understand? Once we become more civilized, that we'll be all right. Once we act like white people, we'll be all right. It's nonsense. How then when we met white people, when I say we, I'm talking about Africans, I'm talking about the people who used to occupy this land before they were murdered and then thrown into concentration camps that they call Indian reservations today. But when we met them, white people were living under what they call feudalism. You know what feudalism is, don't you? You see it in Robin Hood and the sheriff of Nottingham and living in the tights in what's that forest? Sherwood Forest and the rest of it, robbing from the rich to give to the poor. Well, they had to have a setup like that, even if it was only in their minds. Because during feudalism that lasted for 1,000 years. Did you hear what I just said? 1,000 years, feudalism lasted for 1,000 years. And under this social system, the primary social forces were the nobility and the serfs, or the peasantry. And the nobility owned the land. And the serfs, the peasants, they worked on the land that was owned by the nobility. And although they were not slaves, as we've come to understand this question, they were the next closest thing to being enslaved. So if the land got sold by the nobility to somebody else, they went with the land. It was not like they had free mobility, could go in any place they wanted to be. And when they worked on the land, they were able to keep something if they were lucky, but the majority of what they produced went to the landlord or to the nobility. This was the basic primary social structure that existed when we met them. They have no freedom. All this stuff that they wanted to go and share with the rest of the world, talking about civilization, freedom, and thriftiness, hell, was no such thing. You hear this thing about a man's home is his castle. Hell, they didn't have, the only castles in the joint was owned by the nobility. The ordinary white people, they did not have land. They did not have homes that they owned of their own. So what changed? What changed was that Europe set out with a vengeance in the form of piracy and brigandage and slavery. Before slavery and colonialism, white people primarily defined themselves in relationship to each other. Europe was known as this place of warring tribes, of backwoods people, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Celts, all of these people constantly at war with each other. And what united them was slavery and colonialism. So in the past, while they would define themselves primarily in relationship to each other, when they discovered us, when they discovered the land that was the indigenous peoples here, what began to happen over and over again is that more and more, they began to define themselves in relationship to us. This is where you find the emergence of the white man in human history. There was no such thing as a white man. They had to know us before they could become white. You know, it's like saying white people calling white people white. That doesn't make any sense at all, right? There was no such thing as a white man until they came into contact with us. Then they defined themselves in relationship to us. Here's where you have white nationalism, or the European nation, the sense of sameness now that exists among all of them. You with me on that? That's where you get the concept of a nation. You get a sense of sameness. But it's not just a sense of sameness in some abstract way. It's a sense of sameness, which is a subjective thing, the thing in their brain that rests upon an objective material basis. And what is that objective material basis? It is a political economy that has been founded and formed of slavery and colonialism, a parasitic political economy. The white world got rich of stealing the resources and the labor and the human beings of Africa, of Asia, of what we now know as the Americas. So everything they've got, all the wealth that came to Europe and to white people came as a consequence of the construction of this parasitic social system that is known as capitalism. That's how it's known today, as capitalism. And this is where most of our white leftist friends don't get. Even though Marx himself, he didn't quite get it, but he was able to say that what they refer to as wage slavery in Europe, or wage labor in Europe, rested on a pedestal of slavery, pure and simple, in the New World. In other words, even the white working class, right? The white working class itself rested on a pedestal of the enslavement and colonization of African people, of the so-called Indians, and the rest of it. People lost their jobs in Detroit, but it wouldn't be a damn Detroit if it hadn't been the theft of the land of the Indian people. That was what Marx called primitive accumulation of capital to start up in the first place. Y'all with me on that? Wouldn't have been a job in Detroit if they weren't getting bauxite that was coming from places like Guinea in Africa, or in places in South America, that was coming from Africans and other oppressed people. This is what put white people to work. This is what put the white working class to work. This is what created capitalism itself. It's resting upon a base of the oppression of Africa, African people, and the oppressed of the world, which is why today, even though you got people running around claiming to be part of the 99%, the reality is that 80% of the people on earth are trying to live off less than $10 a day. And 50% of the people on the earth are trying to live off less than $3 a day. They are not a part of 99%. At best, they are part of the 20% that's living at the expense of the 80% of the rest of us. Y'all with me on that? So ain't that a big thing? You a math teacher. So we need to understand something about the nature of the system, how it came into being. This is where you see the rise of the European nation itself, the sense of sameness, that occasionally you see disruptions because there are these wars and fights with each other over the loot, over a redivision of the world. That was what they call World War I and World War II. And almost why France and the US got into a tit with each other over places like Iraq, etc. They want who's going to have what part of the loot. Y'all from Chicago, y'all heard of Capone and the rest of them. Every now and then you have to have gang warfare to see which way you're going to share the loot. That's what America has been doing since its inception. That's what Europe has been doing since its inception. So what happens now is Europe gets born. But Europe gets born as a part of a process that disunites the rest of us. So part of the process of developing Europe, developing the European nation, developing capitalism, was a deal that was made in Berlin in 1884 and 85, where all the white powers in the world sat down at a table in Germany and then split up Africa, carved it up and said, look, you're going to have this from France, and you can have this from Germany, and you can have this from the rest of it. And this was a part of that primitive accumulation. So that consolidated the European nation and capitalism. So even as the European nation and capitalism are being consolidated, it's happening at the expense of the consolidation of Africa and African people. We've been kidnapped. We've been strewn all around the world. We call ourselves by all kinds of phony names with false consciousness having been imposed on us. We call ourselves Ghanaians, Nigerians, Senegalese, Haitians, Jamaicans, Negroes, all kinds of funny names like that. And in every place, we've been convinced that we are some kind of minority incapable of taking care of ourselves, right? When the truth of the matter is that collectively, we are at least 1.5 billion strong, but confused and disorganized. And it's hard to get organized if you don't even know who should be on your team. You can't even win when you're pulling the wrong people on your team. I aspired as a youngster to be a boxer and might have been pretty good. And I'm glad that I had a good friend of mine who stopped me from stupidly entering the boxing ring. And I'm not saying there's any boxers in here. I don't want to be offensive. Because my friend told me, he said, look, you don't want to do this because even your own manager sometimes is working against you. So they grind up glass and put it in your mouthpiece. And you're fighting and you're drinking your own blood and getting weaker and weaker and don't even know what the hell is happening to you. You got the wrong people on your team. That's what happens when you become an Afro-American. That's what happens when you unite with America. You got the wrong people on your team. They putting crushed glass in your mouthpiece. You understand? So, it's important for us to know who the hell we are. We are not American citizens. We are not a part of America. We are captives, and we've been in captivity now for several hundred years. Africa is our national homeland. It has been stolen away from, and we've been taught to hate it. We've been taught to hate Africa and everything about Africa, including ourselves. That's right. And we come in all ways. When I say we're Africans, I want to be clear on that. Because what is African culture? Because some people say African culture, you see it with Fela, and the brother here was talking a lot about African culture. But James Brown is African culture too. African culture has been spread all around the world. It just looks differently because we have different experiences in the different places we've been located. You understand what I'm saying? We create African culture where you are. Culture is not something that's bestowed upon us from some mysterious forces in the sky. Culture is something that comes about as a part of the process of the most insignificant, profound endeavor of all human beings. All human society is organized around the process of producing and reproducing life. If you don't have life, you ain't got nothing. You ain't got no culture, right? You ain't got nothing. It is the process of producing and reproducing life. How do we do that? Well, sometimes, if you're old school, Barry White helps. So, how do we reproduce life? That's one aspect of it, right? And then, of course, we reproduce life by increasing our capacity to produce food, clothing, and shelter. Those things that we do to produce food, clothing, and shelter. And this is something that improves. Every generation, all the time, is constantly a process of improvement unless there is an intervention in our situation so that we're not producing life. I say we're not producing life, and here we are in America as an example. And this is not even the best example. And the lifespan of African people in this country is something like 7 years less than the lifespan of white people. That don't make no sense. Left to itself, it is absolutely and totally illogical that white people should outlive black people. All you got to do to understand that is watch your next Olympics. You understand that there's nothing physiologically sane about the notion of white people living longer than black people. That's crazy, ain't it? Ain't that insane? That doesn't make any kind of sense at all. So it's got nothing to do with physiology. It's got something to do with somebody stealing life from us from the very beginning. And if you go to the continent of Africa, you're talking about a much worse situation than that. In Sierra Leone, for example, the average lifespan is 37 years. On the Indian reservations in this country, the average lifespan is in the 40s. So how the hell do white people live so long? They live so long is because they are extracting from us forcibly our capacity to produce life. We produce life, but not for us. We produce life for white people and white power. You with me on that? Yes, sir. So, part of what this struggle is about is to recapture our capacity to produce for ourselves. When I say produce for ourselves, I'm not talking about working for IBM or some of the other major corporate, because if we were producing for ourselves, we wouldn't even see an IBM. If we were producing ourselves, you wouldn't have a situation where all the territory around us is paved so that the rain can't get to it. Where you get up in the morning and go to work and don't come back, if you got a job, and don't come back until late at night. That's insane. That all the daylight hours you spend grubbing, trying to live. That's got nothing to do with production. What does that have to do with? That has to do with capitalism, doesn't it? Because capitalism, the motive force is what? It is commodity production. What is commodity production? Commodity production is producing for sale, for trade, not for human use. So everything in the capitalist society is based on commodity production. It's for profit. Profit motive is the primary force. And because it's for profit, safety comes second. How many of you have ever looked at a commercial for some pharmaceutical thing that they have? Isn't that incredible? They say, we'll give you this for depression. But if you take this, you might drop dead, or you might come close to dying, And then they say, and this is the most insane aspect of this is, and if you feel suicidal, call your doctor. You understand? Now, so that's what people do when they feel suicidal, right? They call a doctor. At best, they call a mortician. You understand, when you feel suicidal. So, I mean, but because profit is the motive, that's the only direction it can take you. It doesn't care about your health. It has nothing about your health. In fact, there's no such thing as health care in this country, is there? And generally speaking, it doesn't exist throughout Europe. That's why in this country, right? I used to know the name of the major hospital here. It's probably not the best hospital, but it's well known. Say it again. Cook County. What is it? Cook County. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Got the same name as the jail, and probably for good reason. But that's why you have a situation where it doesn't matter how sick you are. You cannot take yourself over to Cook County and hop in one of them beds unless you got money. Or what they call insurance, which is another form of money. But it doesn't matter if you're sick or not, if you got money. If you got money, you can make a reservation in the best hospital in this country, in this Chicago. You know that, don't you? You don't have to have money. You don't have to be sick to go to a hospital if you got money. I'm telling you, you can call right now if you got enough money and make a reservation and hop in one of those hospital beds. But that's the contradiction that we're looking at, because capitalism, production by capitalism is for profit. Everything is done for profit and profit only. And if you don't, they'll give you a false appetite. It's something that you don't need. It's something that you never thought about having. They'll make you want it. They created this thing called Ritalin. And then they say, now we have to create a disease for it, right? I mean, they created the drug and then said, let's create a disease for it. And you got your children going to these schools and they drugging your kids out saying they need Ritalin because they're hyper this and hyper that. No, they hyper oppressed. And that's what's happening with them. So it's a social system that is based on slavery. It is a social system that was founded on genocide. It is a social system that resulted in the consolidation of the European nation at the expense of the African and other oppressed nations around the world. We are a nation of people that's been dispersed. We've had imposed on our consciousness a false national consciousness. We think of ourselves as Haitians and all other kinds of things when we're actually one people. We're Africans. You can't get on a boat in Africa in 1619 as an African and then get off in Jamestown, Virginia as a Negro. If we were Africans when we got on the boat in Africa, then damn it, we had to be Africans when we got off the boat here, unless this was the boat that Jonah was on and fell off and was swallowed by the great fish. If it was an ordinary boat, if we were Africans when we got on, we were Africans when we got off the damn boat. And that is just a reality, and that's something that we need to come to terms with, because we've been separated from each other all around the world, and we keep relating to each other as though we're strangers from each other, as though we don't have a relationship. Well, that old Haitian over there, he don't speak my language. You don't speak your language. That's the problem. You know, so the slave master who kidnaps us speaks English and demands that we speak English. And the slave master who kidnaps us in Brazil speaks Portuguese and requires them to speak Portuguese. And the slave master who kidnapped us and took us to Haiti speaks French and required them to speak French. And then we act like we're strangers because we all speaking through the slave master's tongue. But guess what? Even though the slave master speaks French, English, German, and all those other things, they get along fabulously together. It's just we who speak in his language who become more like him than we are like ourselves and don't get along with each other. So we are one African nation of people. And we have to really lock in there. And guess what? Not only are we Africans, we are fabulously rich if we go get it. And instead, we'll fight for welfare here in this country when Africa is the richest continent on earth in terms of natural resources. 12 million square miles of wealth that they've taught us to hate with Tarzan movies and other negative images that's been imposed on our brains by white power, by imperialism. And if Africa was so bad, you wouldn't have to shoot all the white people to get them to leave. And it is literally true. Like you take a place like Sierra Leone, where Comrade Nate has been doing work, and where all African People's Development and Empowerment Project does work. Sierra Leone, where some of the most beautiful diamonds in the world come from Sierra Leone. When you go to your mall and you see all these diamonds up there, chances are they came from Sierra Leone or some other place from Africa. But in Sierra Leone, they dig out these diamonds and they only get paid 32 cents a day and a cup of rice. And in Sierra Leone, they don't even have clean drinking water. And they don't even have a national electric grid. Everything is run on generators. This is because of the wealth that's been stolen from us. We should be fighting like hell to take back what belongs to us, take our resources back for ourselves, because Africa is the birthright of every African person on earth and all of your children. That's your child's birthright. And you go there and look at it and trying to save up your money because you know you're going to be getting married. And so let's go broke, and get this. You got kids who shoot and kill themselves for the bling, when all the damn bling in the world belongs to us. It's our bling in the first damn place. You understand? And so I'm just saying that we have to be conscious of who we are and what our real mission is. And that's why the difference in what you see with Africans here, for example, and what you might see with Palestinians, or you might see with other people who are Arabs, etc. They maintain a connection, even though they might be here. They set up communities here, but they maintain a connection, and they are part of the struggle. That's why when Uncle Sam got ready to commit these horrible crimes that they're committing right now, all over the Middle East, they started locking up Muslims and Arabs all in this country. They took them to Guantanamo Bay. That's why they got prisons here that people didn't even know why they were being arrested and who was being arrested, because they knew they were going to have to fight them. That's why they cowed them down, beat them down to make good Muslims out of them, because they know they would have to fight them. But we see stuff happening to us every damn day. And then they've been able to get away with it without some unity by us. That's why we're here. We have to organize. We have to fight on every front we've talked about. We have to fight on this whole issue of what the police are doing in our communities. We have to create economic entities to take care of ourselves. We have to build a revolutionary movement, because we are going to have to fight our way out of this situation. We are not going to be able to vote our way out of here. I'm sorry. I'm not telling you not to do some electoral stuff. I'm saying you can do electoral stuff if it's tied to the greater good, to the greater strategy that's been developed by your community, not by you, that holds you accountable. But you ain't gonna win no freedom based on that. The only thing you can do is use the electoral process to be able to raise the contradictions, to be able to educate the masses of our people, to be able to enhance our organizational position, our positions of power in these communities, so that we can make a revolution to overturn a system based on slavery and genocide. That's the only way out of here. We're going to have to fight our way out. I was telling brothers just a moment ago, and I'm speaking fast like this because I'm real conscious of the time, and I know that we have these discussions all the time. The only thing I want to do is try to hope to provide a framework for the contradictions that we're talking about, for all the stuff we're talking about. All these contradictions, I hope to try to provide a framework so that it is contextualized by history, by the whole process that gave rise to a particular kind of social system within which we struggle. Because if you don't understand it's a system, you think you're solving the problem by dealing with this individual. Let's get this individual out of office, right? As people say, let's get rid of the Republicans and put the Democrats in. You got a damn system. The system's still there. You got a Republican or a Democrat. In fact, we used to be Republicans because Mr. Lade freed slaves, right? And then the Republicans and the Democrats got together and did what in 1777? The Tilden Hayes Compromise, where the Republicans agreed to remove the troops out of the South that were there to protect us from the crackers in order to go for the Republican presidential candidate to be elected to office. And then it took another 100 years, just about, before you could even vote again in this country. And said, well, you want something now because you can vote. You got a Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Bill, and guess what? The Supreme Court just said, you ain't got no damn Voting Rights Act. Y'all saw that? This is the same, so you're talking about going to the court system to do this and the court system to do that. No, you ain't got no voting rights. Only reason they pretend you ever had anything because you were in the streets and saying that if you don't give us something, we're going to burn it down. That's the only time they were able to make concessions, because you were organized to force a concession from them. But the mistake you made was to assume that the concession was the victory. It was a concession that they made because of our strength and our power. The thing is, we got to tear it down and build a new world that we can live in, and all the other people of the world can have decent human relations. So I wanted to say that, and how much I really appreciate it. And Brother Cam was talking about this concept of globalization. He was talking about this very brilliant brother, Amos Wilson, who has written a book, Black Power, and which I think is an important book, and I think he's an important person. But I want us to be clear that because Brother Cam was saying that Brother Amos had suggested that neocolonialism, white power and blackface, that is something that, you know what I mean by neocolonialism. This is what Kwame and Nkrumah call it. Colonialism is raw, naked, hunky power. Understand? The white people stand over you, they kick your butt if you don't do it, they tell you to do it, etc. But at the time, when the masses begin to rise up and say, kill the white eyes, take them out, etc., then they fall back on this thing they call neocolonialism. That give you the impression that you're in power, right? And get somebody who looks just like you and put them in power, right? It's white power in blackface. They still control it. Yes, that's Obama. Yes, that's Obama. And in the context of the existing system, is down to almost everybody who's there, unless they operate from a base to which they're accountable in our own communities, right? So there was a point that I wanted to make, around Amos Wilson's book. And he was saying that neocolonialism is not something that's just used for the elite, if you will, the African petty bourgeoisie, the lick-spilling, butt-kissing, vomit-eating sellouts in our community. That increasingly is something that the masses, too, have begun to believe in, that they have this capacity to put information in our brains all around the world. They influence how we think and how we think of each other. But what I'm saying is it ain't working. Because it's not just us. Because look around the world and see whether it's working or not. And every time you open a newspaper, every time you go to the internet, every time you turn on your television, you see somebody fighting to overturn this damn thing. And they're getting the same kind of information, but people are fighting like hell. They're fighting in Afghanistan, and they've been fighting there for 10 years, fighting for 10 years in Iraq. They're fighting in Palestine, they're fighting throughout South America. People are saying, we ain't gonna live like this. And they're scared to death about us in Africa. That's why they got AFRICOM there. They put out an entire military operation, a military command that'll control all of Africa, to control it from us and also to keep it from China, because China is the fastest economic entity in Africa itself. And I'm gonna say an example, because there is an objective reality. There's subjective and there's objective. Subjective is it's what's in your brain, right? Objective is what's in the world. If you're lucky, what's in your brain and what's in the world, they meet up. If you don't have unity there, then some people will. Who was that talking about straitjackets a moment ago? But anyway, if there's not unity there, then you're in trouble. But just give me an example. If none of us was ever going to leave this room, or didn't expect to leave this room, and somebody would say, like, this podium here is actually a car. This is an automobile, right? That's what they're pumping into our heads day in and day out. This is an automobile. Now, I'm going to struggle against that understanding, because I know that this is not an automobile, that there are different characteristics between a car and an automobile. But that gets pumped into us all the time. And then what happens is, maybe everybody except me believes that this is an automobile after a while. And what happens is the police then kicks the door in to come in here to do harm to everybody in here. And those people who hop on this and try to drive away are going to be in trouble. Because here's where you have objective reality and subjectivism colliding, right? You have a collision between what's in your head and what's in the world. And what I'm saying is that what's in the world is what the police, the state, and what's in the world is Penny Pritzker. Anybody here know who Penny Pritzker is? Obama's buddy. Penny Pritzker, not only Obama's buddy, she was the campaign chairwoman for the financial chairperson for his first campaign. Penny Pritzker right here in Chicago created subprime mortgage. If you're talking about the brother who was sitting here talking about fighting against eviction, well, you fighting against Penny Pritzker and the whole gang of financiers, the whole corporate entity. That's who you're up against. So it's bigger than Chicago, isn't it? We got a whole different kind of reality. But the point I wanted to make is that no matter what they try to pump into our brains, I grew up with Tarzan. I grew up stealing money out of my mama's purse to be the first to get to the movies on Saturday morning, to sit in the front, to watch Tarzan beat up all the black people and cheer him on. You understand? I grew up with that. I grew up with Little Black Sambo. I grew up with the assumption of the superiority of white people and the rest of it. But all of this nonsense, it collided. It collided with the objective reality that we are confronted with as a people, and the reality kicks us in the ass every day. And that's what Corvell was talking about, reality. Now, our science and civic teachers tell us this and this and this is the reality, but in the world, it don't work that way, does it? In the world, it works up so much differently. And the other thing I found is the most educated of us, we are the most dangerous in our own communities. My daddy used to call me an educated fool. He had a second grade education. I didn't even know what he was talking about until I was about 40, which shows you just how right he was. You understand? And it's because they sell us all this stuff as truth, but it ain't truth. And at the same time they're doing this, they're pushing out the smartest of our children. They push them out of school. They have a vetting process to take the militants out, to take the resistors out, to take the most curious out of there, and then they have this vetting process. So if you survive it, you are a good, malleable Uncle Tom material that they can put in place to run the rest of us, right? And what happens though is that the people in the community don't believe none of that civic stuff, don't believe none of that stuff that's being run against them, and become stronger as a consequence. And the missing element is organization and organizers who would take, and I'm going to say organizers because some of us are impatient with the issue of theory. Theory is critical. Don't be afraid of theory. And most of us are impatient with theory because that usually means that someone who's just going to talk all the time ain't going to do nothing. Just going to have some of those silly things like you've heard about it. You go to philosophy and they teach you, does a tree make a sound when it falls in the forest if there's no one to hear? Wow, that's deep. You understand? And so people spend all their time with silliness like that. But the problem is, the reality is that your oppressor is operating from a certain theoretical basis. And theory is not something that we should be afraid of. We have to create working class intellectuals. We cannot play the African working people cheap. Because if we can understand it, damn it, they can understand it. They need to understand that there's a deeper thing at work here than what people keep feeding us in the newspapers or in Ebony magazine and the rest of it. There's a deeper thing at work here than what the politicians say to us, and we need to understand it, and we can understand it. Fundamentally, we are an African people. We are Africans who have been captured. We're living in captivity not only here. Our brothers and sisters are stretched across the globe. To win our freedom, we're going to have to build an organization that connects all of us and an understanding of who we are. We're going to have to build an organization that ties the centrality, the question of the liberation and unification of Africa and African people throughout the world. And the other thing is that capitalism has to go. For capitalism to go, we have to understand that the working class is the African working class is the fundamental force that's going to make this revolution happen, and it's the way it should be, because it's the workers who produce all value. If there's money in the bank, ain't no banker made no damn money. If there's money, ain't no stockbroker make no money, ain't make no wealth. The professors and lawyers don't make wealth. Wealth is created by workers. Working people create all the value on earth, but working people ain't got a damn thing to show for it but foreclosures and eviction signs. So what we are saying is that we want to win independence, but beyond independence, we want to win social transformation. So the poor, the oppressed, become those who are actually in charge of the new society that we're going to have to create in order to end the world of slaves and slave masters and bosses and workers. Thank you so much. Uhuru.